Hello, everybody. It is May, I believe so, the 29th, 2023. And I'm back. I haven't streamed in a very, very long time, and I do apologize for that. Um, I've been doing a lot of other things as well as you can probably tell behind me, somewhat organizing. It looks somewhat the same, but I've switched the room around and just added a couple of things over here, over my left, your right. I've added a poster I got from the Batman Arkham series. I got that from GameStop. So I got a bunch of cool little stuff around here. But today, just want to do a little chat and talk about some real life stuff in my life, and hopefully that relates to some stuff in your life. Um, I was gonna do some games streaming, but it so happens that the remotes on my Switch are dead. So can't do that. Uh, I am hoping that everything sounds fine because I haven't done this in a few weeks. And I'm hoping that everything is still pretty much ready to go. So yeah, let's have a chat. And if you're going to join me tonight, feel free to um, send me a message with a question or a comment or anything about what you hear. If you have something that you want to say, I'll definitely read it. It's more than welcomed. And if you do this after it's posted on another channel, or whether YouTube or something else, leave a message there too, and I will answer it as soon as I possibly can, which is pretty quick. So yeah, let's talk some reality. Let's get into it. Well, somewhat misfunctioned a little bit, but that's all right. Like I said, we're getting back into the swing of things. Just trying to just get used to it again. It gets pretty difficult to try to do this, not because lack of time, but more so lack of motivation and energy. So yeah, and that's probably one. That's not probably, but that's one of the things that I'll be talking about tonight, and it's definitely talking about reality, more so mine. And I'm gonna try to do this in multiple videos. I will say up front, I like to talk. I've always liked to talk, as probably one of the reasons why my dad wanted me to be in the family business because I could keep people somewhat entertained. I don't really want to compare it to this kind of entertainment, but entertain the masses and keep them around. So I was good at what I did. So I might take long on one of the subjects and um, kind of compensate in the next video. So this might be a multiple series of videos, but I'm going to divide what I'm going to be talking about into different segments, and I have chosen three different topics out of each one to talk about, and it's not motivational. I'll tell you that right now. This is not motivational. This is not something that you're gonna sit here and be like, all right, get all hyped up and everything like that. This might be something that you're going to reflect on. Um, Side note: I apologize if you hear a fan going. Um, I have a little bit. The office that I'm in, uh, this room, a little bit warm, so from time to time, my uh, fan of my laptop's going to kick in. And I hope that you can hear me good on this microphone. Again, this microphone here is used mainly for movies. And when you use a DSLR, DLSR, well, digital camera, and you connect it to the camera, and then you film, and that's how you do it. So, Mr. Camera, you're supposed to be following me. I think I lost my camera. I'm doing this here because I am using the Insta360 Link camera, and it's supposed to follow me around. But I think because I speak a lot with my hands, I think I lost it at some point. I think it picked up probably the Batman's back there. All right. So enough of the side note. I do apologize as well, with somewhat of my manic mind, ADHD, as to some people may call it. I may go on a couple of tangents, but I'm gonna try to stay on point and focused. I do have notes, so that should help. But as I was saying, I'm gonna be talking about my personal struggles. This is not going to be motivational, and I hope that these personal struggles that I talk about trigger things that you may have gone through in your life, and or things that you are probably going through in your life now. I'm not going to go into possible answers on how to get out of those. I'm not going to um, counsel or anything. I can do that after, I guess, because I do have a background in that, but that's not what this is about. This is mostly because I think I want to, in a summary kind of a way, do like a personal journal and bring you along with me. I don't know who out there is going to be watching this, if anybody watches this. I have no idea. Um, it's going to be difficult for me to try to remember some things. And it might be difficult for me to talk about some other things and make it so public, but I guess it's necessary for my own mental health and for my peace of mind, the peace in my heart, I guess, to try to realign myself and not try to think of it as in how can I motivate myself to live life. I I don't think it's I don't know. I don't know exactly where or how this is going to fit in, but I think it's something that I need to do and something that I probably should have done a long time ago. But I didn't have the technology to do it back then, or the time, the drive. I don't know. I guess it's time to do it now because I'm here. So so let's do it, right? Um, and the thing about it is stuff like this that I'm going to be talking about. The majority of my family, I shouldn't say family, the majority of my relatives, and this might get to them. I don't know. But the majority of my relatives and friends would always call it a pity party. Oh, you're feeling sorry for yourself. Oh, here you go again. Get off that. Try to be all sentimentals, whatever. Get over it. That kind of stuff. So I kind of buried those things. I kind of shut those things down. There's stuff in my life, I'm sure. I have the feeling of it, but I don't have memory of it. But I'm sure I've done some things in my past as a kid or teenager or young adult or adult that were bad, I'm sure. But I don't think anything that anyone has done, unless it's like extremely horrific, should be an excuse for everybody else to just dismiss them and say you don't have feelings or you shouldn't have feelings. You shouldn't have mental breakdowns or panic attacks or stress induced panic attacks or however you want to call it. You know, you shouldn't dismiss those things of people no matter their age, their lifestyle, their situation. It doesn't matter. If they're feeling a certain way and they cross your path and you're there to listen, that's one of the things that you should do as a human being, not as anything else, just as a human being. Listen and see what they have to say. Um, I didn't have that, you know, um, and I think it affected my growth, and I think it stunned a lot of things within me that I could have been farther along in, and kind of sounds like my wife and I, we watch The Big Bang Theory when we go to bed. We don't necessarily watch it, but it's kind of like background noise that helps us kind of like get into a lull after either a long day or just whatever, and just phase out because we know the program, we quote it almost verbatim um, on everything that we do. And there's an episode in where one of the characters named Raj. He's from the country of India. His best, quote unquote, best friend, Howard. Um, Howard likes to poke fun and make fun of him and tell jokes about him and put him down, degrade him, and all that stuff. And it's that style, old style of if you poke fun at somebody and if you put them down and hurt their feelings and stuff like that. It's just, it's just friends. It's just friends doing friend things and, you know, they like to bust their chops and, whatever. And it's a good thing. Well, in this episode, Raj's dad points out that his lack of self confidence is probably because of the people he hangs out with, especially that Howard boy, as he puts it, always making fun of him and putting him down. And it makes Raj think, and he realizes, maybe this is right. And then when he brings it up, not only to Howard, but to the rest of the crew, they all excuse it. That's just how people are. That's just how friends are. And he tries to express his feelings, and this happens in multiple episodes. But he tries to express his feelings on how he doesn't like that, and they get upset with him for that. And then he steps away. He steps away from the friendship and tells Howard, we need to stay away from each other for a while because our friendship has become toxic. And of course, Howard gets butthurt. And through the episode, it's all about based on the statement that the character of Howard says after they say what's wrong with Raj. He says, well, he's just upset because he's blaming me about how messed up his life is and doesn't take ownership, becomes very narcissistic all the way up to the last part of the episode. They're in a bouncy house, and Raj just tells him, this is what you did to me. And Howard says, "Well, you hurt my feelings because you did this to me." So it was never an ownership of, yeah, I have fault in it. Not all the fault, but I do have some fault. He never owned up to it. He very narcissistically made himself the victim and put the blame on Raj. And and instead of listening to the situation and the problems of why his best friend was hurting so bad, he turned it around to make it about himself. And that's how I grew up. That's how I grew up. And for the longest time, um, my brother, he's 4 years older than I am, he would be one that I can go to and talk about the things that would happen in my life. And I try to get some counsel from him because at least my brother would tell me real life advice. He wouldn't try to throw Bible and everything else at me. I'll talk about that later. But um, all the way up to he got married, and then that went out the window. But besides that, the rest of my relatives and my friends, it was all always like that character. Is me coming up with, here's what I'm going through. Well, stop feeling sorry for yourself because I'm going through stuff. And I'm not part of that, even though they were. I'm not part of that. You should be feeling sorry for me. So whenever it takes us about, I would say 6 nights to go through the whole series. I think I could be wrong. I think it's probably a little more than that, maybe 8, um, somewhere around there. But it doesn't take us that long. We watch multiple episodes. It's like binge watching, and we finished the whole series in a couple weeks. And every time that episode comes up, it's a little and it's just a little bit. It's not bad, but it's a little harsh because it does remind me of how I grew up. So what I'm talking about here is I want to separate all of these into the different struggles that I've had in my life, and I would love to know, whenever you see this, I would love to know if anybody else went through this same, um, similar, close to, um, or if you just tell me your side. I would love to just to see just how many people out there are in a similar boat. Um, yeah, I mean it's rough, but the struggles, I've divided them into the struggles of a child, a teenager, or preteen to teen, a young adult, and full adult. I guess you would say young adult, somewhere in the range of about like 20 years old, 21 years old. I would say till about 28, 29, and then from 30 on would be full adult. That's how I'm seeing it. This thing's really following me, isn't it? It's like super sensitive tonight. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure what it's catching. I'm not sure what it's catching. Side note: these books right here are actual published um, books that I have illustrated. So if you ever want to wonder what these are, I will explain to you what they are. And if you want to buy some, I will tell you where to go buy some. But all right. So the first struggles, the struggles as a child. I grew up in a very, 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 very religious home, Pentecostal Christian home. Um, my parents converted to Christianity, the Pentecostal sect of Christianity, when they were in Guatemala. I was born in Guatemala, and when I was just a little after turning 5 years old, if I remember correctly, we moved to Los Angeles, California, and my parents moved there as I'm gonna try to catch this here. My parents moved there as missionaries. This thing is kind of annoying. Sorry. Um, my mother had lived in Chicago, Illinois, when she was in her 20s, and I believe she had I believe she got a degree in something when she was here. She went to college there. Moved back to Guatemala, of course. My dad has some kind of technical lineman degree from Guatemala. So my parents are not dumb. They're very intelligent people. But within the culture of, you know, us in Guatemala, there's a lot of mysticism, a lot of superstition. I was told that there is quite a bit of long line of witches in my both side of the family, actually. So there's a lot of like paganism, if you want to go somewhat of a religious titles. My grandmother on my dad's side, she converted to Christianity. She was known as like the Princess of Guatemala for many years. She was very wealthy. And then when she converted to Christianity, she gave all of her wealth away to the church. And today, that does make me very angry because she was very, very wealthy. And if she would have kept her riches, none of us grandchildren, none of her children, nor her grandchildren, nor her great grandchildren would have anything to want for. But church convinced her that it's better to give than to receive. And to have all that money would really push her into evil because, as they teach, which is not true, that money is the root of all evil, and it's that's how they teach it. It's the love of money, but whatever. And that's probably going to be a tangent that I may bunny trails that I may hit because um yeah, I have a lot of church history. So and I'll get to that. But that said, my grandma um then tried her best to convert my father, and it didn't happen. Um my mother was allegedly uh raped by some guy, and that's where my brother comes from. And and of course, you know, well, that's for later stories. Then, when it came time for me, my parents, before they became Christian, they they followed my mother's family side, which are Catholic, and they tried to. Um, I don't know how to explain it, but they were in a relationship, kind of like Romeo and Juliet. The family members didn't like each other. They knew of each other, but one was riffraff and one was upper class. Especially after my grandmother's side, my grandmother on my dad's side gave away her money, then she was really riffraff because now she was um, just barely making it. My mother's side, her relatives are all of money, and have decent wealth. So of course they were the upper class. And in Guatemala, there's no middle class. There is upper class and lower class, and that's it. There's no middle class. Not like here. Um, so it came to the point that my parents wanted to get together. They wanted to get married and all that, but the families weren't allowing it. And, da, da, da. And the story goes that allegedly they went to a church in Guatemala in some village somewhere, and it was the Church of the Black Jesus, to where they went and gave prayers and some kind of offerings, and um, I became a spite baby. I call it a spite baby because to spite the family, they got married, and my mom was then pregnant with me. So at that point, to spite the family, so they wouldn't say, "Oh no, you gotta get divorced," and now there's a baby coming. You have to let us stay together. Spite baby. So I was born, and I think it's 2 years later. My parents then became pregnant again with my little sister, my first sister, and unfortunately, she passed away when she was 2.5. Um, 2 years later, or one year later, 1 year later, 1 year later, because she was 2.5, I was 3.5, and she passed from leukemia in Guatemala. And at that time, there was no treatment in Guatemala to like radiation and chemotherapy and all that. I don't know if there was any here around that time. I'm talking about 78, 79, somewhere around there. 70, somewhere in the 70s. I think there might have been, but there wasn't over there. So she passed away from leukemia. In the middle of the the fight for my little sister to stay alive, um, they went to several churches, Catholic churches and whatnot, and then they ended up with my grandma on my dad's side. She convinced him to go to her church because God would save um, Ruth Abigail, which was my little sister. And they did. They showed up. They converted. She got better for a short period of time, and then just tanked hard, and then passed. But by that point, they were already pretty deep into church. So I know pretty much all of the statements they would have been saying to them of why she died anyway and everything else, which is, I'm not going to say them all, I'm just going to say, which is a very narcissistic religion. Christianity is a very narcissistic religion, extremely narcissistic religion. And they were convinced that it was God's way and decision for that to happen. After that is when my dad really started pushing into the church more and to become a minister. Excuse me. And right around that time is when they decided they were going to move to Los Angeles, California as missionaries, which is about right. I think it was a couple of months after I turned 5 in the beginning of the year. So we moved to California, where my dad started a church there with the help of the church from Guatemala, and he started a church. And later in life, later down the line, when I was a teenager, my dad's church was one of the largest churches, Hispanic churches, not in general, but Hispanic, one of the largest Hispanic churches in Los Angeles. And then there was a lot of stuff. But as a child, I was put under a lot of scrutiny. Um, I was taught, and I guess in modern terms now, I was groomed to become a preacher. Um, that everything that I was going through, everything that I experienced, and whatnot, were gifts of God, and I had to offer those as sacrifices to God, the Christian God, and I couldn't think of anything else. So, as a child, we didn't celebrate Christmas because Christmas was a pagan holiday. We still gave out gifts at Christmas to each other, but it was based on the Christian belief of the birth of Christ. Tangent, even though Christ, I shouldn't even say Christ because that's wrong. That's what everybody calls it. Jesus is the typical name that everybody knows it, so I'm going to be saying Jesus, but his actual name was Yeshua, but whatever. And Jesus was born in summer. He wasn't born in the winter. They were the church in the age of Constantine. Um, they changed it to 25th in order for them to take over the pagan holiday, where winter solstice takes place, and um, the sacrifices that you do during that time in order to take over all of that quote unquote paganism. The church converted Jesus' birth to the 25th of December, which is completely a lie. Many of which the religion causes. But okay, tangent over. So whenever I would go to school, and these are vague memories that I have. I don't have them vividly like I used to, but because they're vague, I can still recall them. I just can't fully see them anymore. When we go to school, we would we would do these cutouts. You know, when you fold the papers together and then you cut them out, make them into snowflakes or into multiple snowmen and whatever. And then you would decorate or do cutouts of Santa Claus. And at school, I would ask about Santa and who he was and what he did and all that. And they would tell me, you know, Santa Claus is actually Saint Nick. And Saint Nick took care of the children. And that's why we pass out gifts, because for a long time, Santa Claus did that for children. And then the population, this is what I was told, population got too large for him to be going from house to house to house, modern times to give children. He started asking the parents to help, and he would give the parents the gifts, and the parents would give out the gifts. So I was fascinated with Santa, but when I would go home, I would show them the Christmas tree cutouts and all of that. That me in first and second grade, well, kindergarten, first and second grade, I would make trees and Santa Claus and snowmen in 3D. All the other kids, of course, and I'm gonna brag on this. All the other kids would make drawings and whatnot, and all sloppy and out of the lines and whatever, and just scribble and cut in. And here I am making, 3D stuff, and where I do the cutouts of the snowman, and then I would get cotton and glue them onto that cutout, and then get glitter and do the faces, and then do white glitter on the cotton so it can shimmer. That was me at first, second grade. And to piss people off, I'm gonna say that I would go home, and my mother would be all like, "Oh, they're so pretty," the Christmas tree all decorated, and I had presents underneath it, the trunk and everything, and Santa Claus and his beard and whatnot. And she would say, "Oh, it's so pretty," and all that. When my father would get home, then he would remind her that this was not pretty, this was not talent, that I was worshiping the idol of Santa Claus, along with these pagans that was teaching this stuff in school. So, to make a point, he would either rip or burn um, these things. So, and I remember just balling up my fist. I was so mad. I spent so many in my young child mind. I spent so many hours. It was a class, but I spent so many hours trying, coming up with this stuff so they could be proud of me. Of look at what I came up with. I wasn't thinking of the meaning of Santa Claus or paganism, Christian idolatry. I wasn't thinking of any of that. All I was thinking about, this is cool. This is awesome. Look what I did. All these other kids, they all have these scribbles and whatnot. I'm making reindeer, and proud of it. Now, I should be using my talents. I should be using my talents for God. My art should be for God. Um, my my talent for speaking should be for God. Again, the Christian God, Pentecostal Christian God. Anything and everything that I do should be to the benefit of the church, which then would be to the benefit of God. Anything besides that, waste of time and a sin. so, so my childhood was based on, what can I do that is allowed, where I won't go to hell if for any reason I would happen to die. Because Hispanics don't have filter when it comes to Christianity, in my experience, my long years of experience in that. I have gone to churches, for instance, after I moved here to Ohio. I've gone to churches and helped out with their youth programs and with their children's programs and things like that. After they learned that that's what I did in my father's church, in his ministry, then they would tell me, hey, help us out. You know, we would love to have your experience and knowledge and all that. So when I would step in and I would help, I would see how they would teach these kindergartners, first graders, second graders, third graders, the type of um, passive aggressive Christianity, very simplistic stories of the Bible, trying to convince the children that God is all good and He's all love and He loves them and He's going to take care of them. And all they have to do is love God too. And when they get old enough to really accept that as a whole reality, then they need to accept them into their heart, and so they can become so God can become their savior. and keep them from evil. Very passive aggressively, very kind. And it would just put me in awe because as a child, that's not what I heard. that's not the things that it would teach us. The way they would teach us is, for example, and this story here, I'm pretty sure is pretty international. The story of David and Goliath. Many secular, and I'm saying secular because I'm using a lot of religious um, statements and words. Secular meaning non-Christian. In a lot of secular shows and whatever, they always use an example of David and Goliath as David being the little guy, the underdog, the one that nobody counts on, and then Goliath being the one that everybody's cheering for, the one that knows it's going to win. Everybody knows it. That's the strength. That's the powerhouse. How is this little guy going to beat this big guy? Kind of a thing. And in Americanized Christianity, Northwestern, as in the United States, I guess, Christianity, they teach their kids that you need to be like David. And David, seeing the bully that came to Israel named Goliath, and he was bullying them and taunting them and making fun of them and putting them down. And David stood up to that bully. And David, even though the story says that he threw a rock and he hit him in the head, he really didn't kill him. He kind of knocked him out. And you have to realize that David wasn't a little kid. David was already, you know, more closer to an adult. So he knew how hard to hit him. So this is not teaching to throw rocks at people. This is what they're teaching. This is more of, you need to stand up to the bullies and tell them to stop and show them that they need to stop, and they're not going to be able to bully those that are not as big or as strong as them, because somebody else will be able to come around that is as big and as strong as them and stop them. Because bullying is a sin. Being evil to people is a sin. And you don't want to be in sin because God hates sin. And you don't want God to hate you if you're committing that sin. That's how it is here. In my experience, when it comes to Hispanics, and the way that not only I was taught, but I heard many other people teach in churches and whatnot, they don't mess around when it comes to their kids. They don't sugarcoat it. Goliath was a mean, gigantic man that was killing everybody that was not of his same religion, of his same belief system, and came from the same place that he lived. They were not born like him. And he hated everybody that was not like him, especially the Jews. So whenever he seen Jews, he would kill them. And he was killing a lot of them in the war. And that's where David got tired of it. And God had told him, you can take care of it and kill this guy. And he got 5 rocks. And I don't know. Okay, I do know in interpretation, but in story, he's an extremely good marksman when it comes to slingshots. But he picked up 5 rocks, but only threw one and killed them with 1 rock because he was an evil man. And he died. And when he died, he went to hell. And now he's burning in hell for eternity. Who do you want to be like? You want to be David, who follows God's instructions and is loved by God and protected by God? Or do you want to be like Goliath, who hates God and loves sin and now lives in hell for the rest of his life? That is the way Hispanics teach that story. There is a difference. There's no sugarcoating. So there's a lot of fear, and it might have changed since I was a kid. So I'm not saying it's still like that. Maybe I am saying that, so I should change that and say it might not be like that anymore, but it was like that when I was a child. The quote unquote fear of God was placed into me and into all of us kids back then, that we couldn't look at somebody the wrong way without it being sinful, without it being bad. Like this camera right now. Holy crap. I mean, why does it keep doing this? It keeps losing its. Yeah, you stay over here. That's This is a good thing to know too, because if this thing keeps doing that and I'm doing like gameplay, that's probably not going to be good. I don't know if it's going towards that poster back there, but oh well. When I was a kid, I had a very, very, very vivid imagination, and since I was very, very, very young, I have always believed in ghosts and in the supernatural because I experienced that. I would see people that weren't there, and I would talk with them and all that, and then people would ask me, "Who are you talking to?" And I would say, "Well, so and so's right here," and they'll be like, "There's nobody there." So, as a kid, I believed in the supernatural. I believed in ghosts and energies. Um, Later on, I picked up, the stories of aliens, and I'm like, well, yeah, there's got to be aliens because why would we be the only ones in this universe that God created? Now, 'cause of course, I would throw God because God. So why would God create only one planet and say, okay, you guys are the only ones that would definitely be allowed to do this, to live like this? So I believe in that stuff, and the supernatural. I experienced it. And remember when I said, as Hispanics growing up in Guatemala, there was a lot of mysticism there. There was a lot of superstition there, a lot of witchcraft, what we would call like hoodoo and voodoo, just deep stuff. And so that all kind of like migrated here and became Christianity. Now it was allowed. So I I began to try to draw things that I would see or that I would feel or that I would dream. And some things spooked my parents and the elders of the church. Other things, they would tell me that when the next time we ended up in church, I needed to go to the altar and pray because they were just so vividly weird, or in their terminology, demonic. Especially when I was drawing dragons. And then Freddy Krueger came out. Oh, when Freddy Krueger came out, man, I was drawing that dude everywhere. Because, yeah, I thought he was cool. I really did. And art that had anything to do with horror just was not allowed unless that art had an end result of glorifying God, right? I lost, I guess I can say thousands upon thousands of drawings. Not that I lost it, I left them somewhere and couldn't find. More like my parents or my uncles or the elders of the church would burn them or throw them away, rip them after they did like a prayer over me. Literally, me kneeling down, they standing around me, praying over me, casting out all evil thoughts and imaginations. And if I would have any demonic influence or possession that needed to get out too. And and in the process, then ripping up or burning the drawings because apparently I was summoning evil spirits. It's horrifying as a child, thinking it now as an adult. It's horrifying for a child to sit there and use their talent and then be told that that talent is wrong. A lot of my pessimism, a lot of my what is that word I'm thinking about? Not starts with an S. What can I think of that word? It happens to me a lot nowadays. I forget words. Um, Complacency, I guess. That's a big word. That's a big one, and it means the same thing. But I linger around when I'm doing stuff. Um, and I apologize to my wife about this. But for a few years, I was going to do her countertops, change them into something else, and she had come to a decision to do concrete countertops. And because I was afraid to do them wrong and to mess it up, I just kind of like got complacent on it, which I just kind of let it go and kept letting it go and kept letting it go until finally I did one. I'm like, you know what? If I mess it up, I can take it off and put more wood down and frame and whatever, and then do it again. I got to do it. And after years, I finally did it. I did the island, and then and then I don't know what happened, but then it took me a few months, to then do the rest of the countertops. And part of me just procrastinating, that's the word, procrastinating. And for me, part of procrastination comes from being afraid of failing or doing something wrong, which comes from doing stuff as a child that I thought was right and I was doing it correctly. And I was told, no, you're doing it wrong for the wrong reasons. That's not the way to do it. But I was never taught what was the right way. I was just told it's the wrong way and stop doing it. And if I would ask questions, I was in the wrong for asking questions. Why would I ask questions? Why would I stand up to my elders? Why would I disrespect people by asking questions? Which is one of the reasons why I've told my sons and mostly told my daughter that if you have any concerns, if you have any suggestions, if you have any opinions, if you have anything, plead your case. You have the right to speak your mind, doing it respectfully, of course. You don't have to do it rudely and disrespectful, but in a respectful manner, plead your case in things. Explain why you want to do things. And we will explain to you either why you can or cannot do something. Which is why my daughter at 9 years old, she, um, or 10 years old, she started playing the video game Bioshock, which most people would think that that's a very violent type of video game for a 10-year-old to be playing. But she pleaded her case. She gave her definition of why it would be good for her to do it. Why she would love to play it and experience it. So we got it for her. And it helped her. And the story behind that is for a later time. But I didn't get those kind of opportunities when I was a child. If I would do something wrong, I got my butt whooped. What that means is a leather belt in one hand, my wrist being held by my father's other hand, and my butt getting whooped. And it wasn't 3 whips and go to your room. It's until he felt that I got the gist of the lesson, and then he stopped. Go to your room, think about what you're doing, pray, and read something from Matthew, and I will quiz you on what you read afterwards. Yeah, do that to a 8, 9, 10 year old now. So in a religious home, you're taught rules and regulations, standards of that home based on biblical guidelines. And these are not like the Pirates of the Caribbean guidelines. That, they're more like suggestions. No, these are literally, according to them, written in stone because Moses carried them down the mountain and taught them to everybody. Written in stone, rules, regulations, standards, and guidelines that we have to live by. Certain people I could play with, certain people I could not. And keep that in mind because later on, that becomes more of a reason why I kind of turned into what I turned into as a teenager. But as a kid, my tastes as they were developing, the things that I liked, the things that I didn't like, um, they were much different than what my friends and my cousins and the things that they liked. Most of them were um, most of the things that everybody else liked was based on where we lived, and not me. From a young age, for example, um, I don't remember when or where, how old I was or anything like that. I just know I was young, very young. I heard what I grew up to know to be bluegrass, the music bluegrass, and I fell in love with it. I was like, that is amazing. So I'm like, where does that come from? And for many years, I would just here or there just catch it and and listen to it and wonder who would play that and how was it played because I grew up as a musician in the church, so I loved music, playing instruments, and so I always try to figure out where it was at. And once I became older into my teenage years, when I could actually research stuff, Not like how kids do it now with Google, where you type it into your phone and oh, there's the answer. No, I'd have to go to the library and go through the little drawers with the cards in it, and then go through the index cards. Some of you will know, many of you won't, and go under the letter B until you get to bluegrass, and then go to the reference number and aisle of where the book was at, of where it would show you what was what. The rest of my friends and family members, they were into rap. They were into the oldies. I mean, I like the oldies and all that, but they were into the oldies. Um, again, rap. They were into just more of the Hispanic culture music, Mexican style music, Guatemalan music, which is um, very different to what I liked. I like music wise is what I'm kind of sticking with. Music wise, I liked again bluegrass, but I also liked um, British rock, which later on became goth. What was it? Goth rock, I think it was. Um, I liked what was then known as electronic dance music. There was no words, no nothing, just beats and electronic sounds from keyboards, digital pianos, for those that don't know, synthesizers, stuff like that. My friends and cousins and all that, they were into the oldies and all that because again, we lived in a Hispanic neighborhood, so we would have Hispanic gangsters, which were known as cholos, and these cholos had lowriders. Everybody knows lowriders, with the hydraulics, and they bounce and whatnot, and they would roll around playing the golden oldies, and or anything that had to do with a Hispanic singer or music artist. And they would cruise around the parks and all that, blah, blah, blah. And of course, church music, anything that had to do with church. And that's not what I was into. I was into very, very different stuff. Very different stuff. Then, as at a young age, um, 11, 12 years old, I became a lot more intrigued into the supernatural, dark stuff, and I knew that I had to keep that quiet because everybody would think it was evil and bad, and they would do everything possible to keep me away from it. But the more I tried to individualize myself, the more they tried to encapsulate me into what they wanted me to be. So I would try to branch myself into different modes of myself. Um, and I became a people pleaser, I guess, to still try to incorporate the things that I liked, but yet please the people that I was with. Not necessarily to hurt their feelings. I just didn't want to hear their disappointment that I didn't like what they liked, that I wasn't like them. So around 11, 12 years old, my one side, and I don't know if I had I don't think I had multiple personalities, although thinking back it's like maybe, but no. around 11, 12 years old, I kind of started giving in more to church. Um, the descent started at around 8 years old. The reason why is because at 8 years old is when I did my first sermon. I preached the first time ever in front of the congregation, and somewhere I have a photo of it. And if I do, I may upload it and so everybody can see it. I think I still have some very real photos. I think I'm gonna do that to not only embarrass myself, but so everybody can see what I'm talking about. But at 8 years old, I stood before the people and preached. And I'm trying to remember as I'm telling you this right now, what is it that I preached about? Because I used a very, very, very often taught story. And I was very nervous. And I can only see the photograph. I can't see myself doing it. I can't hear myself doing it or any of that, but I can see the photograph. So I have the vague feelings. I was very nervous. I was shaking. I remember I do remember again feeling, but I can't see it in the back office waiting for my father to introduce me, and I was sitting there praying, trying to hold the pee in because I was going to pee myself. I was so nervous, and I came out, and everybody was clapping their hands, welcoming me. And I remember looking over this. I do remember because these are the very few things that I remember about my father. That now I'm trying not to hold these things against my father now, but I remember looking up into the on the stage because where I delivered the sermon was on the main floor, and then there was a stage behind, which were the main pulpit. And I remember looking up to where he was sitting, and he was sitting there with his smile squared up, very proud, looking at me coming up. Me and my clip-on tie, and I delivered my sermon. I was supposed to deliver a 45-minute sermon, and I think I did it in 25 minutes or 20 minutes or something. It was very short, which annoyed my father because then he had to fill in the rest. Imagine that, right? At 8 years old, but I thought I killed it. I thought I was like, man, I did it. That's it. Then at around 11, 12 years old, I gave in more into the religion. By that point, I was very, 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 very aware of all of the things that were going on in our church. Now, mind you, when it comes to Catholics, for the most part, are is a religion that's by the book. You have to do the religion by the book. You have to pray by the book. You have to talk by the book. You have to teach by the book. And one of the things that you do by the book that is very rare to be done, and it can only be done by specific people with specific quote unquote training, is exorcism. I remember I said between 10 and 12 years old, I became very, very intrigued with witchcraft and the whole dark side of that. And at 12 years old, I experienced my first exorcism that I did myself. It took hours to try to convince this energy this evil energy that is known in Christianity as a demon, to leave this certain woman, and so we can go home. We didn't have cell phones back then. I was 12. I'm 49 now. We didn't have 12 cell phones back then. There were pay phones and house phones. So, and I think, no, we didn't even have pagers yet. And those that don't know what pagers are, they're little tiny little boxes, probably about the size of this business card here. Yes, I work for Red One Realty in Dayton. If you ever need to sell a house or buy one, give me a call. But on the top right here, instead of being a phone that got a phone call, you would send through not a touchpad, but buttons on your phone back then. It looked like this. Check this out. I'm prepared. Either a rotary phone or a push button phone. So you would pick up the phone, okay, and then here you would see the letters. I'll bring it closer so you can see it. See the letters, you see the numbers and the letters. So if I wanted to start with a J, I had to get that number there and go to here, let it go, come back over here again, go to here and let it go, come back over here again, go to here and let it go. But I had to do that quickly. So the system can know that you were going for J, okay? And then you would go to your next letter. And you would wait a couple of seconds, go to your next letter, do it real quick if it was in sequence, spell out your message or your phone number, whichever one. And then in that pager, that was the size of this business card, on the top there was a little digital screen, and not like your cell phone. It wasn't like this. It was kind of like weird little digital black numbers in kind of like a greenish background. And that phone number would pop up. Later on, it would do the letters that I just showed you. It would pop up a message, call ASAP, or you would just send 911 for emergencies, or 411, as in if my parents wanted to know where I was at or whatever, or your friends wanted to know what was going on. What's the 411? What's the information? Are you coming? Are you not coming? Where are you at? That kind of stuff. Then you had to go to a payphone or a friend's house or somebody's house that had one of those phones like this, and you had to borrow that and call whatever number you got. I'm trying to correct this stupid camera. I don't know why it's doing that. But maybe if I just deactivate it. It deactivates itself, so I'm not sure what's going on. Well, at 12 years old, when I had my first exorcism, my brother was also there. Mind you, again, I was 12, he was 16, because we were 4 years apart. And whenever he was in there praying, trying to exorcise this demon, I was on the phone trying to get a hold of somebody to get a hold of my dad to come over to that house. That house was about, God, if I remember correctly, an hour and a half from where we lived in Los Angeles. And it wasn't until about 2 in the morning, 2, 3 in the morning, when finally one of our uncles called back to that number, asked what was going on. We told him what was happening, or what had happened, because at that point, the evil spirit, the demon, had left, and the woman was at that point sleeping. So they said we got a hold of your father. He's on his way there. So somewhere around that 2, 3 o'clock, somewhere around there, my father, my mother came to the house, to that house. They came in all panicking, whatnot. We told them what happened. We took him over inside the room. The lady woke up, and he did, of course, his ceremonial thankful prayer. I don't know, something to seal the deal, I guess. And then we went home. Some of the things that you see in the movies, like the voices changing, or a voice talking, like you could hear my voice talking, but then there would be like a secondary voice behind it. Or sometimes when they would open their mouth, you can still hear someone talking. Um, if it's a woman, and you would normally hear a woman with like a very high pitched voice. So when they're talking as deep as me or deeper, like way, way deeper. That stuff's true. That stuff's true. Levitation, true. Eyes getting bloodshot, kind of snake like, that's true. When you start seeing, not drastic like some movies, but when the houses shake because of some kind of massive power surge, this energy, gets mad, roar, and the house shakes. That's true. Um, I didn't experience it myself, in the many times that I've contributed to exorcisms. But whenever the character in a movie reaches out to another character and causes them to levitate or push them or anything like that, I didn't see any of that, so I can't attest to say that that's true. Um, but there's quite a few aspects of it that are, because I've seen them, I experienced them. But that was the beginning of, I would say, one of my lives. It was one side. Now coming into my teen years, and there's a lot more about my childhood that I can go into. And I should back up. I should back up and talk about that, because I'm for some reason I'm trying to gloss over things. But when you're 9 or 10 years old, 11 years old, 12 years old, 13 years old, 14, but let's just stay in the young age as a child. There's times where you will lay in your bed in your room, or you're watching TV in family room, living room, wherever. Nowadays, your child may be on their phone or on an iPad or anything like that, or playing a game. And the child would hear in the background of whatever it is that they're seeing, they would be hearing the argument of their parent. And I can't believe that you would do something like that. I can't believe that you would say that. I can't believe that you would go there. Why would you do this to me? Weren't you even thinking of your family? How dare you? Stuff like that. Or, God, you're so stupid. Because why would you do something like that? Only stupid people do stuff like that. But I'm just trying to come up with stuff. But children hear those things. Even if you're locked up in the bedroom and they're, again, in their room or living room, wherever it is at, playing whatever it is they're playing or watching whatever it is they're watching, don't think that they can't listen. When adults argue, they don't argue quietly, and they don't argue with just words. They argue with body language, with lifestyle changes. They fight um, loudly or silently. They fight as a mime or as an opera singer. What's the difference between the two, you may ask? Well, thank you for asking. I shall explain it to you. A mime, which I was a professional mime, imagine that, right? You have to perform in front of people. Probably one of the reasons why I talk so much with my hand. You have to perform in front of people and tell them a story without ever saying a word. Your body language is the loudest language you have, not your mouth, but your body language as a mime. That kind of performance becomes very powerful because there's things that you say without ever speaking a word. The opposite end of that, if you go to an opera, the performer is performing with partially their body. They have their costume on and all that, but their main focus is to get across the words that they're singing along with the tune that they're saying it to or with, along with the volume, and then the tone of the tune that they're singing, and then the fluctuation of their voice lets you know they're angry, they're hurt, they're sad, they're happy, they're joyous. So they're not expressing it with their bodies, they're expressing it with their voice with a little bit of accent with their body. And those can be either one of those, the mime or the opera singer, can be what adult fights are, what the parental fights are. And most parents lose their filters. My parents lost their filters when they fought. Every time they had a fight, they will lose their filters, their inhibition to restrain themselves from saying what they wanted to say. Um, they would lose the ability to think before they spoke, and it was their opportunity to let the other one know exactly what they were thinking of them and why they were thinking it, and screw the world and everybody around it. And unfortunately for me, I was always in that crossfire. I was in the room, they were in their room or in the living room or outside or in their car, but I could still hear them. And for the unfortunate part of it all, not all the fights, but some of the fights would always end up with what I regret about you. So my mom would be like, I regret ever knowing you. Well, I regret marrying you. Well, unfortunately, I have to live, and I'm going to say it in English because I remember the statements. I can't translate them for some stupid reason. So in English is, unfortunately, I have to live looking at your spawn that reminds me of you, one that I never wanted, but there he is. Me. And I can't tell you what it was like to hear it the first time. I don't remember it. I can tell you what if felt like hearing it over and over again. You know, everybody knows what a skateboard is, and I was a skater, among other things, which I'll get into later. But it's like grabbing a skateboard and walking up to you, or someone walking up to you with that skateboard, and just mustering all of their strength and twisting and just hauling that skateboard right on your face, making sure there was solid contact, and then scraping the tape, the sandpaperish tape that holds your feet onto the board that is on top, and just scraping that deep into your face and just ripping off your skin. That's what it feels like when you hear your parents regret them ever having you as a child. It doesn't feel like that anymore. Because now, as an adult, and I've come to terms with, it is what it is. I'm here, so this is my life, this is what I do. Um, it doesn't feel like that anymore. But as a child, when you have no reason, when you have no anything, you're getting smacked by that. And then when it comes to you trying to stand up for yourself, that how dare you say something like that? Then they start comparing you to your brother, and it just gets worse. I would hear my parents fight, throw dishes at each other. This is not my mom throwing dishes at my dad and my dad just ducking and don't throw. No, it's my dad grabbing the same dishes that just broke. Now they're sharp and edged and all that, throwing them, fling them right back to my mom. Yeah, I mean, pans flying, all that. Well, if you're gonna be this way, well, I don't want to live here. And then my dad slamming the door and leaving. A couple of times, my mom was the one who left. Mostly was my dad. And then I would go to sleep crying because I would hear them screaming and yelling at each other. And well, my parents are going to get divorced, and I don't want to, And then somewhere like around 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm hearing crying, and I'm like, who the crap is crying? Because my mom can't still be crying because she would always cry. So I would go out to make sure my mom was okay, even though she said hurtful things. I would go make sure she was okay, but it wasn't my mom that was crying. It was my dad that was crying, but he was crying to God, praying for God to help and intervene in these situations. And I'm thinking to myself, why would God intervene in this situation? Why don't you intervene for yourself? I mean, just stop being so stupid, right? But because he was praying, I'm like, oh well, everything's good now because God's going to step in. As a child, me personally, I was one that even though I didn't forget, I forgave very quickly. And even though they said very, very hurtful things about my existence, I always wanted to be around them. They would plan to go places. I wanted to go there instead of going with my friends. It astonishes me now that I would do stuff like that. But I did it. I did so many drawings that I destroyed myself because I didn't want them to see it. Sometimes you'll see movies where kids will draw their feelings and you see the scribbles of the characters, and then on those scribbles, then you will see scribbles of the blood or very crude um, depictions of mom stabbing dad or dad hitting mom, and then there's blood and stuff like that. It's very crude drawings. Now, remember when I told you when I was in kindergarten, first and second grade, I was doing 3D type of depictions of snowmen. And so now at 8, 9, 10 years old, 11 years old, can you imagine the type of drawings I was doing then? I wasn't very, very advanced, but I was advanced enough to know how blood looks like, to what a stab wound look like. I mean, Freddy Krueger, you know, what burning and flames look like. And I would draw myself burning in hell, smiling, because I put an end to the fights forever. And because I did that, I ended up in hell. It's terrible. But there's so many times that you can hear that your mom is disgusted by looking at you because you remind her of him. There's so many times that you can hear your dad regretting you're there because you're part of her, you came out of her, you sound just like her as a little kid. So for me, I would draw my feelings because nobody would listen to my feelings. I just can't stand it at home. They're constantly fighting, and they hate each other. And oh, that's just them. That's how married people are. Married people have to argue with one another. They have to fight. That's how they express themselves. But as long as they're together, they love each other. Don't worry about the fights. They love each other. That's what I would be told. No, no, no. They don't. They don't regret you. They don't hate you. No, no. Those just things that people say in order to hurt each other because they want to top each other and you know make each other cry. But then the next day it's fine. If the next day they're talking to each other and it's normal, then it wasn't. It was fake. So don't believe that. You know, my wife and I have been together for 16 years, and we married for 14. And we have had our arguments and we have had our fights, but never once did I think, you know what, you know what, you're sitting there yelling at me. You know what, I regret just to try to top whatever it is she's saying. Wait a minute, what kind of nonsense these people were telling me as a kid? Those are just things married people say to each other. They still love each other and they love you deeply. But they just say that to hurt each other just to see who can win the fight. As a little kid, as a child, not a teenager yet, but as a child, I would tell myself, whenever I get married, I will never do that. I will never put my wife down just so I can have an upper hand. Never do that. I always knew that we would always have fights. I always knew, you know what? They're a different person than I am, so I'm sure we're going to disagree on things from time to time, but it's not going to be to the point of me degrading them. The marriage I'm in now is my second marriage. In my first marriage, with my first wife, we had our disagreements too. We had our serious fights. Actually, we had more fights than we had disagreements. And most of those fights came because family members butted into the relationship and made things worse than what they really were. We had some bad times here and there, but they were not, really, really bad. But then family members stepped in and made them really, really bad, and then we would have serious fights on that. You know, each other trying to defend our own positions and never never agreeing, coming to some kind of compromise to agree on something and stop listening to the external voices and just listen to each other, it became very difficult. But even then, I wouldn't sit there and degrade her. I wouldn't sit there and put her down. And you know what I'm saying? Even then, we both knew. Me and my ex-wife knew that our relationship was based to have our sons, Skylar and Joshua. They were meant to be here, and and we believed that was it. That was the purpose. And at the end of our marriage, after I think 7 years, right at 7 years, um, we separated. We divorced, and we're friends to this day. Not only because of our children, but I mean, we're human beings. We got to respect each other, and not mistreat each other. And we stopped listening to external voices and all that. So things worked out in a sense of, yeah, well, we're friends. It's cool. It's whatever. But again, even with someone that I knew, the only purpose there was to have our sons, and there was no further progression with it. We couldn't progress further than that. I still didn't utilize that to say this is all you're good for. You're only good to have babies, and that's it. The rest of you is a waste of space and time and that. No, never, never, ever, ever, and never, ever, ever in my current marriage now, after 16 years of being together, 16 years. And I'm not saying it like that because holy crap, it's a long time. No, it's saying 16 years. There are marriages out there that don't last that long. There are just couples that are dating that don't last a year because they can't seem to find a common ground. And I'm saying all this because of the comments that I made when people were trying to excuse my parents' behavior on trying to tell me that I was a mistake being a spite baby to spite the family. It was a mistake for me to be here. There was one point, and at the moment I can't remember exactly if it was my dad who said it or if it was my mom who said it. Or maybe they both said it. Who knows? Someone said that they wished there was my little sister who had survived. They didn't complete the sentence in saying, and me die. It was just, they had wished that it was my little sister who had survived. So was there something complicated in the pregnancy that when I was born, that I shouldn't have been here? And somehow I did come here? I will never know. Unfortunately, my mom now, my mother, she lives, close to my brother, and unfortunately, she's not all in her right mind. So I will never know. But that I took it as an oh. So it would have been better for my little sister to be here than me then. Well, it's crazy. No child should sit there and listen to something like that and try to figure out, decode the things that they don't understand. As a child, there was things that they were saying that I didn't understand. I couldn't comprehend because I'm a child at that time. My mind is not yet capable of understanding adult statements of relationships and regret and anger and hate. I'm trying to figure these things out. And even though I'm trying to figure these things out, but I know that they're bad and they hurt because just the basic things that they say do penetrate and hurt. I sit there and the very next day, It's like it's to me, it's like a brand new day. And I try to help my mom with washing dishes, and I try to help my mom with cleaning the house. And then I tell my dad if he's gonna go and visit some church folks, I'll go with him so I can help him minister and counsel them. And some of the things that I've told my wife is that my brother and I would then gauge what was going to happen either the next day or that weekend by the degree of the fight or the level of anger within the fight that my parents had, which was in California. We have Disneyland, that's in California. We have Universal Studios, that's in California, of course. We have an amusement park called Knott's Berry Farm, and it's kind of like a Western themed amusement park. Then there's Six Flags Magic Mountain. Six Flags, if you're here in Ohio, we had a Six Flags many years ago. It came and went within just a couple years. But excuse me, but Six Flags here in Ohio would be a lot like Cedar Point. And I'm sure, just imagine a theme park full of high speed roller coasters, and no theming, just the roller coasters. That's Six Flags. Okay. Um, and then of course there was the beach, there was the mountains, and then there was the park. Now the degrees went from the park was the most mild of the fights to Disneyland, which was the most extreme of the fights. And the reason why is because the park was free. So if there was like a serious tone but no anger, it's kind of like saying straighten up. No, you straighten up. Oh, fine, whatever. Then the next day or that weekend, we would go have a picnic at the park just to appease us boys, my brother and I, that everything was okay. But if it was throw down, plates flying, pans exploding, food being thrown, kind of thing, you know, I hate you even more. Why doesn't God kill you? Well, because I, I must have done something, a really bad sin to to be here with you. I don't know. I'm making up stuff at this point. I just trying to put the degree of fight in there. Um, so if it was that bad, we would end up in Disneyland because Disneyland was the most expensive of the trips. Six Flags Magic Mountain was the second most expensive, because it was further away. So you had to travel longer. So the expense of gas and then food and then go to the park and then come home. After that was Universal Studios. After that was Knott's Berry Farm. After that was the beach. Then the mountains. No, the mountains, then the beach, then the park. And the reason why on on that is because the mountains, we would go to like Big Bear Lodge and um, stay the night. And of course, it was somewhat pricey, but not bad. The beach um, wasn't as pricey. You can do quite a bit of stuff, but then to eat there and whatnot, that what had his expense that I understand now. I didn't understand that then, but I understand now. And then of course the park. So depending on the degree of the fight, depending on where we went. And let me tell you, the biggest nastiest, most painful fight ever. Took us on a trip, a 1 week trip to Yosemite National Park that even constituted one to have one of the church elders. Um, his name was Neto or Nito, and he went with us to try to keep the peace. And I remember that it was a really, really vicious fight. I don't remember the fight itself or anything like that. It was really bad. But a few weeks later, we we were heading on a 1 week trip to Yosemite. Um, I can't explain Yosemite. It's a national park. You guys have Google now, so get on your phones or laptops, desktops, wherever you're at, your watch, and just Google Yosemite. I don't remember anything of Yosemite except what I see in photos or what triggers vague, very, very vague images when I see um, videos or movies that have scenes from Yosemite. But I don't remember any of it. I don't remember none of the trip. And what's curious about all this is I asked this question to myself, to God, to the devil, to other gods, to the universe, to the sky, to anything that would listen. And I'm saying that because that's how I said it. Not necessarily in that order, but that's how I would pray. How is it that we go to church Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday? Literally, I'm not joking about that. All of those days and preach on love and kindness and preach on unity, God's forgiveness, His grace. And yet we live in hate at home. And yet I was taught as a kid, hey, quit your crying and smile. Everything's okay. Quit your crying and smile. Don't show the people that you're upset. They need to see that you're strong. They need to see that you're happy. They need to see that you have peace. They need to see that you have love. That's on our way to church. As we're pulling up into the parking lot, and I'm sitting there crying because they just had a nasty fight and they're still fighting in the car. And then they sit there and look at each other with this hate. The whole expression, if looks could kill, my parents would be dead 1,000 times over. They would look at each other, sparked a smile, and because there were people that were at the door, they would give each other a kiss and get out the car. And then one would go one way, one would go the other. And then as on their way there, then they would come up with an excuse of why they were going that certain way. And then that would spread because usually they would go in the church together. But when they would go different ways, they were in a rush, they were in a hurry, they had to take care of certain things. And then my mom would call a certain lady that, to help her work on whatever it was. And then my dad would call an elder or a deacon or an usher to come and help him do whatever else he needed to do. They would make up an excuse why they went separate ways. And my brother and I would just sit there like shaking our heads like, oh my. Or if my brother wasn't there, because later on in life, he literally went on and did his own thing, and I was there by myself, taking down the beatdowns. I would sit there and I just wanted to bawl my eyes out. I would wish that lightning would hit me and I would just be dead right then and there because I did not want to get out that car and go into this church and act like nothing happened, like nothing was ever said, like nothing was ever done. And then a cousin or a friend or somebody, you know, when I was as a child, then I'll be like, somebody from the church would come in and say, "Hey, you need to come and help me with the kids," because again, I was the pastor's son. I was the main son, the main child of the church. So even at a young age, I was the main aide to the children's ministry director or the youth ministry director until I became the children's ministry director or the youth ministry director or the praise and worship director or the assistant pastor. Yeah. And then I became um just kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but well, a lot. But after Bible college and I went back, I became um senior pastor, and my father started working towards his title of being the apostle. Now, an apostle means that they no longer serve at one church, but they are over many churches. So he started working on that side of quote unquote ministry because he wanted to open several churches or assist several churches. This thing again. So yeah. So for a couple years, I became the senior pastor. So I've been in every level of ministry in a church. I was forced into every level of ministry in the church to try to define as a 8, 9, 10-year old, well, 11 year old maybe, 10, 11-year old, to try to define what a church split meant. To those that don't know, a church split, it's kind of like a mutiny in pirates. An elder, an usher, or a deacon, someone in authority in the church, doesn't agree with what the pastor is doing, the senior pastor, the main guy, doesn't agree with what he's doing. So he rallies support of other members of the church and lets them know that they can minister and lead them better than the current pastor. But the current pastor is not going to relinquish his position anytime soon. Therefore, they are going to split off of this church and start their own church somewhere else. Hence, the church split. So at 10-11 is when the first church split happened. Because the person who did it found out most of the dirty secrets of my parents. Dirty secrets meaning their type of arguments and fights and discussions and regrets and the way they treated each other and all that. And then how fake they were when they got to church. And, that they were not ministering correctly to the people. So they split. And for some stupid reason, I would blame it on myself. Maybe I didn't help enough. Maybe I didn't do enough. Maybe I wasn't preaching enough. Maybe I wasn't praying enough. Maybe I wasn't singing enough. Maybe I wasn't doing enough. Whatever. And now God hated me because I wasn't helping my parents enough to heal their marriage. So God took away half of the people. How how deep must a kid be indoctrinated into that belief system to think that an entire church split? I'm talking about hundreds of people, hundreds of people deciding, yeah, I'm gonna follow this other guy. I don't like the current guy, so I'm gonna follow this other guy, and leaving. How would a little kid think that that's his fault? Why would he even come close to think that that's his fault? But it happened, and I don't know why. Besides the fact that now, as an adult, um, you get so entangled in the indoctrination of the belief system of Christianity that you give more authority in your life, more power in your life to the belief system of sin and disgrace and evil than you do to what's positive and good and light. I I couldn't fathom why it convinced me as a little kid to think this is my fault. That's what I thought. There were times where I would come home from school and I didn't know how to cook. I I didn't know how to do any of that stuff. So I had to get on the phone, like that one there. I had to get on the phone and call my aunt and ask if they knew where my parents were. And I knew that whenever my aunt said, "Hey, yeah, we've been expecting you. We have a plate ready," they had a fight. My aunts knew it, so whoever got called first was the one that was going to take care of me. So I would come home from school, and I'm not going to say I did my homework because I never did my homework. I would draw, I would watch TV, until the cartoons were over, and then I would turn it off because I didn't want to watch any other unless Batman was on. This was the 1960s Batman. If that came on, if that was the evening that it was on, then I would watch that. But besides that, yeah, I didn't watch it. Um, and then I would figure out, well, it's getting late, and they're not here, so I would call, and then whoever I would call first, they would say, "Yeah, we got a plate ready. You got to come over and eat right away because we got to leave for church." So then I would go over, eat, and then go to church. And when I would get to church, one of the two was there of my parents, either mom or dad. And then later on, my brother would show up. Again, 4 years older, so he had a way more freedom than I did. So I had to figure out how I was going to get home because I knew that if only one of my parents was there, that meant that the other one was who knows where, and it was going to be unlikely for the one that was there to take me home. So then I would ask my aunt, "Can you take me home?" Or I would ask one of the elders of the church or one of my friends' parents if I could get a ride home. And then I would get a ride home. The older I got, the more I was like, well, if you guys are going to be like this, whatever. I would walk home. And I just didn't live a couple miles down the road or next door. No, we lived like, I think it was like, what, 10 miles, something like that from there? Not, well, maybe not as much. Probably about 7. I don't know, somewhere around there. It's under 10 miles. But in the LA streets, that's a long ways away. And at night, in those times, if people don't know you, that's it. I mean, you may not make it home. But I walked those streets to school and to the church so many times that I would greet neighbors and all that, cut through their yards and whoever did have yards, and get home. There was a period of time in my life, my adult life, where I would hear stories on how um, people would grow up, and I would hear them grow up parentless. And there was another statement, uh, street kids, and where the streets would raise them, and not necessarily violently or anything like that, but they walked everywhere. The parents didn't take them. If they needed to do something, they got on their bike or on their skateboard or walked to wherever they needed to go and then come back. The rule when the lights came on at night that you needed to be home by then. I never thought I grew up like that until I really started paying attention to memories of my childhood, and I'm like, holy crap, I did grow up like that. I did raise myself in the streets. The streets did help raise me, not only because of gangs later on in life, and in this series I'll talk about, but yeah, I would 12, 13 years old walking down LA streets, skateboard, scooter, in not motorized scooter, but kind of like skateboards with the miniature bike wheels, two wheels, and then scooter. Yeah, I was one of those kids. You had to find your way to survive. One way or another, you had to find your way home or to wherever else you needed to be. And once you were there, if the people that were going to give you rides were there too or able to, then you got a ride home. It's crazy to me once I realized that as a kid I grew up like that, and it's not a bad thing, except for those times where you're walking home or walking to church or walking to school, whatever, and you have time to think. For example, and I think this will be the last one, um, and then on the next time I come on, I'll talk about my teen years. Unless I think about more stuff as a little kid. I think 10 or 11 years old again. Most of the more childhood drastic stuff happened around that time. So somewhere in that year, preteen years, I remember I was eating food. Of course, there's two stories that I'm going to tell on this. This one, I was eating early dinner, and my mom had cooked dinner and all that, and then she went and took a shower to get ready and all that. My dad was already ready. He was reading his Bible, studying. My brother, he was watching TV, waiting, and I was eating. Everybody had finished eating, but I was still just picking at my food. I didn't want to eat. And my dad said, "Hurry up and eat. We gotta go to church." And I didn't say anything. I just kept picking at my food. And he said, "If you don't hurry up and eat and finish your food, you're gonna find your own way to church, and you better end up in church." or else by the time I find you, I'm going to beat your butt pink and blue. Interpretation of Spanish, of course. And I kind of chuckled. I remember chuckling because I'm like, yeah, right. Like he's going to leave me. How am I also? How else am I going to go to church? So my mom comes out of the room. She's ready, and she looks at me and she goes, "You're not done yet?" And I'm like, "I'm not hungry." And my dad's like, "You're going to finish all of your food. We have kids that are hungry, and you're here wasting food." And I said, "Well, then give this food to those hungry kids because I don't want it." So he got up, whacked me upside the head, and then told everybody to go get in the car. So I started getting up out of the table to go get in the car, and he pushed me back down on the chair. Nope, you're going to finish eating, and then you're going to find your own way to church. But you better be at church. So they left. They left me. And then I sat there and looked at this food that I didn't want to eat because I thought it was gross, little kids. So I threw it outside. I didn't want to throw it in a trash can because they would have found the food in the trash can. I threw it outside in a place where they wouldn't see it because I knew the animals would eat it. Birds, not necessarily animals, but birds. And then I put my plate in the sink, and then I went to my aunt's house so I can go to church. Well, they were already gone. So I went to my other aunt's house because they always took my grandmother, and my grandmother took her sweet little time and would always show up to church late. But they were already gone. So there was nobody that would take me to church. So I walked to church. And I had time to think that these people had the nerve to leave. They don't love me enough to wait or to just say, you know what, don't eat it. If you can't eat anymore, then that's it. Don't eat. Let's just go to church. They were like, no. Who cares about what you like and don't like? You finish what we gave you, and we'll see you at church. Have fun walking there or getting there. And I walked there. I remember I got there late. And again, these are vague memories. It's not like I can see them vividly, but the feelings and sensations and all that of the memory. But I got there, so I didn't get beat afterwards. But I got there. I did get told in front of the whole church to, once I sat down, to get out of the pew, come to the altar and kneel down and repent before God for the rest of the service. So I came, kneeled down at the altar to repent of my sins for the rest of the service, but instead I showed up, kneeled down to start repenting, and I fell asleep and slept through the whole service there in the altar. I did it though, right? I didn't move until the very end. And that's when my brother went over there to get me because the church was over. And he knew I fell asleep. But he showed up laughing at me, shook me and said, "Hey, pretend you're done praying." So I kind of like pretended I was done praying and got up. I slept the whole way. It is what it is. I was tired. I walked all that way to church. Screw that. The other story is my dad had a thing about finishing food, not wasting food. My mom, she was more lenient on it, but my dad, he was a stickler. Don't waste. One morning, my mom cooked eggs, and I believe this is when I started strongly disliking runny eggs. Not the yellow, not the yolk, but the white. Because I sat there and I looked at these things, and my mom was in some kind of hurry, and I don't know for what. But she cooked the eggs, put the eggs down, and then left. And I'm sitting there looking at these things. I don't know why my dad was still there. I guess he didn't have anything to do, but he was sitting. He was sitting at the front of the table next to a wall. I was sitting here, kind of like where I'm at with you, and behind me was a closet. Kind of, it was like our pantry in the apartment we lived in. And my brother sat on the other side, the other end of the table, and then my mom would be across from me. But my brother was done, and I think him and my mom left together, or he left and then mom left, or something like that. But it was just me and dad, something like that. But I know at the table was me and dad, and I didn't want to eat these things because all I can see was the yolk in the middle and boogers sitting around it. It was still real slimy. It hadn't cooked all the way. I was I was under 12 years old or something. Yeah, somewhere around there. I was preteen. And my dad, every few minutes, he would be like, "Eat your eggs. Eat your eggs. Zender, you better eat your eggs. What am I telling you? You better eat your eggs. I will make you eat your eggs. Eat those eggs, or I will feed those eggs to you." And I'm sitting there, and I just messed with him. I didn't want to, nothing. He got up, went, got ready or something, sat down in the living room, and I don't know what he was doing. He was doing something, but I was just twirling the eggs. And he was still, "You better eat those eggs. I'm not playing with you. You better eat those eggs. I'll make you eat those eggs." And I'm sitting there, it's like, whatever. I'm not eating these things. Ugh, no. Lunch came. I had a bowl of cereal that I only ate half of it, and I had the eggs in front of me. My mom had already come back from whatever it is she did, and she made sandwiches. I don't remember what kind of sandwich, but I remember it was a sandwich. I can vaguely see the bread as a sandwich. And she put it there. And she was going to take the eggs and the cereal away, and my dad said, "Don't you dare take that away. He is going to eat everything that's in front of him, or I will feed it to him." And my mom's like, "Quit being like that. He's not going to eat it. He doesn't like it. Just let him eat the sandwich and let him get off the table." He's like, "Nope, he's not going to get out of the table until he finishes everything in front of him." And I wouldn't. Dinner came. This is about 6 o'clock or so. Dinner came. And I know this was on a Monday because, again, remember, we have church Tuesday through Sunday every night. And service started at 7. My dad would always be there 2 hours before. So this in memory, I don't remember the day, but I am making the strong assumption because it was already 6 o'clock and everybody was still home. This means that this was Monday night now. And mom was about to finish cooking dinner. And my dad got up, walked over there, scooped up the eggs off the plate, and didn't just plant them on my face. He rolled back and smashed them on my face and rubbed it as I fell back into the closet slash pantry behind me, splattering eggs all over the doors and the walls and the floor. And then I had to clean all that up, which I didn't do a good job because when when we moved from that apartment, after I graduated, there was still egg stains on those doors and walls. I laugh about it now, but it wasn't funny then. Now, as an adult, I try to teach my kids not to waste food. Don't waste the food. Eat what you have in front of you as much as you can, but at least make an effort, you know. And if it tastes nasty, then say that it tastes nasty, and again, plead your case. Don't just and then no, plead your case. For example, my wife now doesn't like eggs. Okay, she's a vegetarian, not a vegan, but a vegetarian. She doesn't like eggs because it's of the texture. She will eat the yolk, but again, like me, I can eat the whites and the yolk as long as the whites are fully cooked all the way. If the whites are fully cooked all the way, I'm good with it. But if any of it still has that white clear snot on it, the whole thing is ruined. She at from time to time, my wife can't eat eggs. She can eat them, but after COVID, I think it was, she lost the taste for eggs, and then when she started getting taste back, that didn't come back with it. So similar to why she's a vegetarian, there's just things that she lost the taste for, and there's reasons, personal reasons of hers of why she doesn't eat meat anymore, which is fine. But she's an adult now, but I'm using it as an example. If she would have to plead her case on why she wouldn't eat eggs, then like she did this morning, I try to be nice and cook eggs for her so she wouldn't have to cook. She hadn't slept, and so I was trying to do something nice. And I try to use a small, really, really small, about this size, skillet, iron skillet, to cook the eggs in. And I thought they were all the way cooked, but apparently it burnt the bottom of it, semi cooked the middle, but the top still had that snot. And unfortunately, all she wanted was the yolk. So the toast that I made her, she dipped it into the yolk and was able to eat that. But she couldn't touch anything else, of course, because the snot. And I get it 100%. So again, if she was a child and had to plead her case, well, she would plead her case on the texture, the sensation in my mouth of eating snot. I can't do it. It's not that I want to waste food. It's just I can't put that in my mouth. So as a reasonable parent, anybody would say, and I apologize that I keep looking down here because I'm used to it instead of you. Any reasonable parent would say, okay, you know, if I try to cook it all the way so it doesn't have the snotty texture, would you try it then and see if you would eat it? To try to compromise. Hey, let's compromise and get into a middle way and see if we can get this done. Some children would say, sure, I'll try it. Other children would be like, no, I already got it in my head that that's what it is and I'm not eating it. It all should be reasonable. No, none should be a reason to get a facial of sunny side egg, oh, well, almost raw sunny side eggs on your face. And then the sandwich, because I always leave that part out for some reason. And then the sandwich. Eggs first, then sandwich. Luckily, he didn't get the idea of pouring the milk on top of me of the cereal that was still sitting there. But the eggs in the sandwich, yes. And no, I did not have dinner that night. uh, my wife says, your parents were horrible. Going through all the memories and stuff like that of things that I feel wrecked me instead of taught me before I became an adult, and just hindered my growth. I would say, maturity wise or whatever, into my adulthood. Yeah, yeah, my parents were pretty horrible. So, there was some times where, I can say we had some good times here and there. Unfortunately, there were a lot more bad times than there were good times. There's times where I sit there and I think, why is it that people always grasp at the bad things more than they do the good things? Most of the time, it's because here's the answer that I give myself. Most of the time, it's because there's a whole lot more bad times than there are good times. And it doesn't balance, it outweighs it so much that how are you going to grab onto good things in order to balance out the bad when they're just so overwhelming? As a kid, I vandalized my classroom in a solidarity of rebellion to life. My friends, my two friends that did it with me, I wasn't the mastermind, mind you, but there was two others there. They were doing it to to get back at the teacher. I was doing it because I thought it would be cool and fun to get in trouble and see what would happen. See if my privilege of being the pastor's son would kick in and I wouldn't get as in trouble. No, it never kicked in. I was in the fifth grade and I vandalized this. We broke into the school. We put chewing gum on the lock so it wouldn't close, and then came back. I think it was during lunch hour or something like that, and then opened up the classroom, went in there, broke all the pencils, ran all over the tables, broke all the chalk. And to those that don't know, well, just research chalk and chalkboards in old-fashioned schools, and it'll come up. We broke all of them, and then we pounded on the erasers, the chalkboard erasers, to create the dust and spread it everywhere. We threw paper everywhere. We knocked down a few bookshelves because we were running over them and lost our balance. And I can't tell you how we were caught because we were not in the room. We left. And there was no security camera technology for schools then either. They were for general property, big giant cameras for the general property, but they weren't the kind that were like I have here that many schools have now, where they put it in the classrooms to monitor and safety and all that. There were none of that. So I can't tell you how we were caught, but we were caught. Something tells me that somebody snitched on us, like somebody else, like one of the other two that did it with me told somebody else to come and do it too, and then they chickened out at the last moment. And instead of coming with us to have some fun, quote unquote fun, they went and they told the teacher. Or maybe one of us decided to draw our names on the chalkboard. One of those two feels right. I don't know which one feels more right. Fifth grade. I was in the fifth grade in a school that they used to call magnet schools. They're called CDCs now, I think it is. Where there's specialty schools that teach you specialty classes. Back then, the school was a CDC or a magnet school that taught the new and up and coming computer systems. Oh my God. There's so much more popping up in my head that Jeez. Yeah, I've been talking for a while. Like I said, I like to talk, especially when it comes to something that I'm very familiar with, like my life, or a certain subject that I'm passionate about and whatnot. There's so much that I can talk about my childhood. There's so much more of my teenage years, which I'll be getting into the next one. But I'll say this: in my notes, I have it way at the end, but I think I'm going to end it like that with every segment that I do. I have many struggles listed here: struggles as a child, struggles as a teen, struggles as a young adult. All of those three, always been made fun of in every three of those, criticized at every turn of those, judged and compared. Compared mainly to my brother. My brother is the golden child. I will say that. He was the favorite, still is the favorite. Um, not necessarily by my father, but totally and completely by my mother. And I will explain that once I get to it. I have struggles as an adult and many other things that I'll talk about under that one. But the last thing that I have written on here in all my notes, things that I'm going to be talking about, is the struggle to stay positive. Because even as an adult now, when we should have all the answers, or not necessarily all the answers, but when we should have most of the answers, the majority of the answers, not necessarily of life itself and why we're here and stuff like that, but more of how to avoid future struggle, not to repeat the mistakes you did before, not to repeat them in the future. Because if you don't listen, if you don't pay attention, if you don't excuse me, if you don't learn from your mistakes, then you are 100% doomed to repeat them until you learn from them. So then, and it's not learning a certain lesson, like, oh, okay, I learned that. It's more of learning what not to do to get you back in that position again, learning what to do to not get yourself in that position again. Either one. And at 49 years old, I should call myself 50 because there's reasons, but so I'm gonna say at 50. At 50 years old, I should have the majority of the answers on why I should be positive. And for the most part, I'm good at staying positive. For the most part, I'm no longer as pessimistic as I used to be. For the most part, I'm not as depressed as I used to be, as often as I used to be, or as deep as I used to be. And I'm talking about every sense of depression. At 50, I should be able to shake it off, as Taylor Swift says, and throw a middle finger up in the air and be like, whatever. But it is hard. It is the biggest struggle of life is to stay positive. The biggest struggle in life is to not only stop looking at your past, but to be able to see your future and say, with a deep sigh, I'm going to make it. because the more and more I go into these struggles that I've been through in my life, all the way up to present day, I'm like, how in the world am I going to look forward to say I'm going to make it? It's a struggle to stay positive. I'm doing my best, and I'm sure that I have more in there to do even better than that, but it's too deep to dig down and try to bring it out to make it happen. This is the reason why I said to everyone at the beginning, none of this is motivational. None of this is for me to tell you, hey, you know what? Um, you're gonna make it. It's gonna be okay. You know, look at me. Use me as an example. No, don't use me as an example whatsoever. Don't. Don't do it. And the reason why I say that is because I don't have it all figured out. I don't know if I'll ever have it figured out. I may make it, but I'm gonna make it beaten and bruised and broken. Not like some people out there that are like, holy crap, how are you doing this? You're not a good person and you're out here living your best life. And we'll get into that. All I can tell you is just do your best. Just try. And if you can move that day, then move. If you can't, then don't. Don't force yourself. Life just gets harder when you force it. Go with the flow as best as you can, not the flow of what other people say, but what you have. You cares about anybody else. Everybody else is just going to screw you over. But just go with your own flow. Roll with the punches as they come. And whenever you can get up and keep walking, then get up and keep walking. There is no meaning to life. There really isn't. You're just here to do what you can, enjoy what you can, and whenever time comes that it's up, then it's up. Kind of sad to say, isn't it? Either way, but I'm gonna leave it at this. This is where I'm done at. I talked a whole lot more than I wanted to, but um, my wife was ready for bed and go to sleep, and I was still like wide awake. I'm not anymore. So yeah, I thank you guys for being here. If you're here, I don't know who's here, but whoever is here, thank you. And if you're seeing this on YouTube or anywhere else, that wherever else that you see it, that I may upload it to, which is probably only to YouTube, actually. Thanks. If you can subscribe, follow, like, comment, let me know a little bit of your story. That would be great. Tag me. Um, if you're doing, videos of your life story, um, like I am right now, tag me in it. And then we can exchange stories and questions and you know tears, screams, punches, whatever it takes. We can try to see if we can help each other. So thank you. I greatly appreciate it. Again, subscribe, like, comment, follow, whatever it is. If you want to, cool. If you don't, that's all right. And I will hopefully do my best, my utmost best, to be back Wednesday. I'm trying to do these Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It should be good. I'll try to. Well, if I'm gonna, you know what? I'll choose days that I do these talks and days where I play games. So let's do every Monday. I'll do this series here. Let's talk reality. That's the series. Let's talk reality, my reality. And if you want to add your own, you're more than welcome to. Besides that, again, thank you. I hope you guys have a good night, a good day, good afternoon, whenever it is that you see this. And yeah, I guess I will catch you on the next one. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. See ya.